There we go. All right, we're super excited to be here. Thanks for your time. I'm gonna kind of walk around because that's how I like to present, make it conversational. And while Greg pulls this up, we're starting with a quote that's usually the last slide of our deck, but I thought it was appropriate because we're in the birthplace of democracy. And so one of my favorite philosophers in history is John Adams. He's the second president of the US, and he's a constitutional framer. And he wrote that, and I'm gonna paraphrase here in a bit, but in order to preserve liberty on the side of public virtue, we need to make land ownership available to everybody in society by dividing it into small quantities so that everybody could own real estate. And so there's this long history of why real estate ownership specifically is so important. And that's why we've been obsessed with this and done everything that we can to bring real estate ownership to everybody in the world. And so Tokr Labs, we're building public markets for private assets. And so if you think about what that means, it means that everybody in the world should be able to click a button and own it. So if you look at Robinhood, Coinbase, these are public markets. Anybody can download an app, click a button, and own a fractional piece of something. You don't need a couple $1,000s to own a share of Amazon anymore. You can have $1 and you can own a piece of that brand. And so that's what we're building at Tokr, but for private assets. And if you look at what's happening over the last couple decades, the private markets are where all of the value is being created. And so by the time companies go public, there's no value left for people, which is really sad. And so we have to solve this problem. And I see that we're having some technical difficulties. All right. So this is important. We're obsessed with this not because real estate, like tokenization, is going to make real estate more valuable. It's because ownership in our communities, the places we live, work, and play specifically, is important to community. And so Tokr is public markets for private assets. And if you think about where we are today, if you wanted to invest in individual, private, commercial real estate assets, you either have to be an accredited investor in the US and many other countries. That means you have to be a millionaire, not including your home, and or make $200,000 a year. Typically, there's some online sites, but typically the vast majority of investments are done with signing a subscription agreement via DocuSign and sending a wire transfer. Or if you're non-accredited and you go on the crowdfunding sites, you've got adverse selection. There are a bunch of people who are desperate to raise money. They're not the best developers, and they're selling you snake oil. And when you think about real estate tokenization, today it's just bullshit. So I want to say this twice. Real estate is not more valuable because it is tokenized. Tokens are more valuable because they are backed by real estate. All right? And here's what I mean by that. Tokens are valuable, and what we're building is valuable because it is open, it's composable, it's interoperable, it's programmable. And so if you think about the subscription agreements and the cap tables, what power you can have by making it globally accessible to everyone in the world, the creativity that can happen. And so we looked around, we're like, where are we gonna build this? We started building on Ethereum first, but then we switched because Solana's for the poor, and so are we. And so we're so much for the poor that we went through years of working on this, but we're finally an SEC qualified issuer of securities as of 2 weeks ago. And if the tech was working today, we would demo the app for you live. But we'll throw the invite code in the Telegram chat when we're ready. And you'll be able to invest for yourself if you have a US bank account. And in the coming months, we're gonna make it globally accessible, not just with bank accounts, but with your Phantom account. And so the Rove app is like the tip of the iceberg. It's the on-ramp. You can download it, and it feels like FTX or Robinhood or Coinbase but for real estate. The barriers to entry can't be $100. It can't be $10,000. It has to be $1 frictionless. And we started to build integrations so that you can link your wallet and invest in real estate without selling your crypto. And so as a proof of concept, we did this first with an integration in MetaMask and Aave before we got SEC qualified, just to learn. And basically the use case there is, let's say you're long Sol and you don't want to sell it. You also don't want to realize a capital gain and pay taxes, but you can deposit crypto, borrow against it, and then use those funds to invest. And so we've built that use case, and now we're rebuilding it on Solana, and so that'll be there in the coming months. And what you see, that interface is kind of like a Solend or a Compound or Aave, but for real estate. And so, there's a pretty long roadmap. What we're doing is basically building a bridge from CeFi to DeFi. At the top, that's the tip of the iceberg. That touches consumers. It's an on-ramp. Everybody gets a Solana account when they open up the Rove app. And we're enabling that through an integration with Web3 Auth that we'll publish in an update soon. But then once you have that touch point, you can start to do really interesting things. You can leverage that account to create unique user experiences. But even better, the reason why we want to open source everything that we can is that it's been so frustrating. We knew that blockchain technology could impact finance. But now after building a fintech app, we know deeply how hard it is, how much is simulated to make it frictionless for people. But that's millions of dollars and years of work. There's so many components of our tech stack that should be commoditized. They should be easily stacked like Legos and pointed at other opportunities. And so while we're building Rove, that's like our iTunes, but we know we were successful if somebody then builds Spotify and points that at real estate. Or they take the same tools and you have the touch point, that's a compliant entry point, and then they take the same technology and point it at campaign finance. Anything that brings people together in a community where they need to pull their resources in a compliant way and localize it. And then you can bridge to an open layer. So let's say you're streaming cash flows to a Solana account, that's KYC AML, but then the person wants to borrow against their assets in that account. They could then do that in the open layer without on-ramping that next person. And so that's the long-term roadmap. So that's what we're doing over the next 24 months. Our OKR, our North Star, is we need to on-ramp 1 million people with Solana accounts. They won't even know it. They're just gonna get value. It'll be like magic. And that's what we're doing. So we view Tokr as art with money, and the world's our canvas. Let's paint a better one. That's all I got. Thanks. Any questions? Download the Rove app. Follow us at Tokr Labs on Twitter. We're going to be posting updates. We'll put a link and an invite code in our Discord soon. Yep.
Hi. What is the boarding for someone to use your app?
It feels very much like Robinhood or Coinbase. So if you've ever used any fintech solution like that, they all KYC AML people. And so when we think about what we're building, it needs to compete with that frictionless experience. The best analogy to the full stack application, which I reference is just more DeFi, would be Centrifuge. And they built that mainly on Ethereum. Then they had to build their own side chain. And when you on-ramp there, you go through one KYC process. Then you go through one AML process with different companies. It's a headache. It can't be like that. And so ours, we're integrating with a company called CryptoProof and adding additional experience, UI to make it as frictionless as possible.
And with regards to would the same apply with Phantom, or would it be a connection with Phantom or all the wallets that you would support?
Yeah, so if you go to, when we open the DeFi pool, which would be like a city funds you can bet on, and it's like, let's say you've used Solana, it would be like that, but yields coming from real estate instead of people just borrowing the funds. So you connect your Phantom account, and then you go through a KYC AML flow. So you got to add additional information there. I believe that in the future, and one reason why we're building this now in this way, in the Rove app even, is that people will self-custody their KYC, their AML, and their investor status, and then they won't have to on-ramp with everybody. It's so dumb that we keep rebuilding this over and over, right? And so either we're gonna do that or we're gonna leverage somebody else's open source protocol. But everything should be, if it can be, I believe it should be open source. So like a lot of times people are like, why would you use blockchain for that? And I'm like, have you tried building it without? It's fucking terrible. And if it can be open source, it should be, from my opinion. I want to flip the challenge, like, why aren't you open sourcing that? So.
So awesome. I think it's fantastic. I think the ideas are phenomenal. What difference does Tokr have from platforms like Fundrise or, these crowdsource type real estate investing or something like that? I'm not sure if you're familiar with those.
Yeah, so Fundrise, you download an app and it's like a REIT. It's a real estate investment trust. You can't pick the properties. There's a minimum, usually, hundreds of dollars. And there's no liquidity, and they're closed source. They're very much Web 2. And, you can buy real estate in that way. That's great. You could buy stocks before Robinhood, but you needed a brokerage account. It's $500. It's not accessible. And we believe that it's important not just to be indexed in real estate, that people should own the places they specifically live, work, and play. And then beyond that, build communities. So that's why there's a social component in our app. There's a digital community so that people can say, I believe in green buildings and I want to see that vision in the world. So that's why individual properties is important. That's the main difference.
So there's a dApp called Realty. I don't know if you've seen it, where real estate is fractionalized and you invest into properties. So you can buy a certain amount of shares in property, but the properties are actually occupied by people. So the people pay rent and then the rent gets redistributed to all the token holders. So you invest let's say, $10,000 and you get 15% a year from the rent that people pay. So would you have a yield element like that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And last time I checked, I'm not sure if they're available to non-accrediteds in the US yet. I hope they do. I think it's important.
I think so.
But commercial real estate generates yield. Typically, they pay out quarterly.
Okay. And your yield will basically be built into the product.
Yeah. And so we're bringing people access to the same deals that wealthy limited partners are invested in. So typically family offices, they'll invest $1 million because they want to get an 8% yield, just cash flow. And so we're just bringing people that same opportunity.
The yield's going to be transparent. So you can see there's 10 properties you can invest in and this one's giving 15%, this one's giving 11, this one's giving 8, and you can choose.
Absolutely.
Obviously, on the onboarding for a user, you seem to have done a pretty incredible job. But on the other side, for a property manager, what does that onboarding look like? And so when you approach a property or a person who's managing that property, how did you get them to onboard into the world of crypto? Are they dealing with, different regulatory, or did you find a way to innovate on that? Also, this is a layup because you told me the answer to it and I was very impressed by it. So please tell everyone.
Good question. Yeah, we thought about it this way. We started with the use case first and now we're building the protocol second because you can't really skip where the rubber meets the road. You've got to solve the hard problems. And when you look at real estate crowdfunding, one of the biggest problems, like tech aside, is adverse selection. You want to find access to the best deals. And so we haven't had to approach property owners. They've approached us because we've also lowered the barriers of entry for them too. And so, one, we bake fees into the share price. So they don't have to raise their cost of capital. And when you think about the share price, you want to do it in a way that's accretive to investors, that as soon as there's a secondary market, that the shares would trade above $1. So that's one. And two, we take compliance on ourselves. So that's why we went through the process of filing with the SEC as a series issuer of securities. And so that means property owners don't have to change anything about their business. If they're raising monies from limited partner investors, then we can just be one of them. We're one entry on their cap table. And then we're just bringing access to the people so they have a seat next to the wealthy.
I think also that's all the time we have. So thank you very
Cool.
much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Tokr Labs.